Amidst the geopolitical tensions around Greenland, the USA, and Europe, could the World Cup soon be used as leverage? Now, the reason I ask is that in the last 24 hours, many of you may have noticed this, a potential boycott, is it going to come to that, of the 2026 World Cup has been suggested as potential leverage against Donald Trump in response to his threats to acquire Greenland. We're all aware of that. The US president believes his country needs Greenland for national security reasons. And now, Trump has not ruled out using military force. He's since vowed to implement economic tariffs on a whole host of EU states, including the UK, from February the 1st, until the US is allowed to buy Greenland. But now, not so fast in the eyes of many. The German politician Jürgen Hart, a member of the Christian Democratic Union, a confidant indeed of the Chancellor of Germany, has raised the idea of a potential World Cup boycott in a German newspaper. This politician, Jürgen Hart, had said dropping out the tournament would only be considered as a last resort in order to get Trump to see sense on the Greenland issue, pointing out that Trump has made it clear how important the World Cup is to him. So, a potential boycott, is that on the cards, and could the Germans lead it? German football broadcaster Constantin Eckner joins us live. Constantin, good morning. What do you make of this? And what do you make of this specifically from this German politician, Jürgen Hart?
I guess the Europeans, or the Germans especially, they try to get any leverage on Trump, because right now it's really hard. How can you actually pressure him into doing anything, or into refraining from doing something? And that's why some politicians, you mentioned Jürgen Hart, and also one member of the Social Democratic Party, brought up at least the scenario of boycotting the World Cup. Now, we remember probably ahead of the World Cup in Qatar, there were also discussions about a potential boycott, but for completely different reasons. Back then, it was more the human rights situation in Qatar. Right now, it's a much more dynamic geopolitical confrontation between the United States and a host of countries.
Do you think the German public, Constantine, would buy into the threat of a potential boycott?
Hard to say. I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of people just enjoy watching the World Cup, going to a beer garden or whatever, and then watching a game on a big screen with a couple of friends. Let's be honest. I mean, it's so what it is, right? World Cup is still leisure for a lot of people. But on the other hand, the recent weeks and the actions by the President of the United States have, of course, upset a lot of people in Germany and in many other European countries. And when you mentioned acquiring Greenland, I mean, you would probably annex Greenland, to be honest. And I mean, it's just, I mean, that's unheard of in modern times. We are back to a time when Olympic Games were boycotted by one side of the Cold War. And I mean, if it comes down to it, I'm not sure, but we don't know how the world will look in May or June.
That's a good point. There's some way to go yet. Simon, I mean, do you envisage a situation where a nation like Germany, and a powerful one at that, would use the World Cup as leverage here against Trump?
I don't know why sport feel it needs to be involved in this conversation. This is a diplomatic issue that needs to be dealt with by politicians. Trump says a lot of things. I mean, I was listening to Jeremy Hunt on the weekend saying there's an acronym for Trump which is called TACO, which is Trump always chickens out. Well, tell that to the Venezuelan president. I'm not sure he does. But this is a political negotiation, and I'm sure it will blow over. I mean, these Germans, they seem to get themselves involved with things that's not really their business at times. You know, when we were at the Euros, they were debating whether they should fire LGBT flag colours over the top of stadiums because the Hungarian team had seen some legislation passed in their country about lessons about homosexuality in schools being banned, and the Germans wanted to fire LGBT flags or broadcast LGBT flags over the top of various stadiums.
So what, the Germans virtue signaling?
Yeah, well, I think they are. I think their country is in crisis through a woke outlook in that particular part of the world, which is ironic given some of the history of that country. But the dynamics of the circumstances surrounding this situation is, I don't think it's sport's responsibility to fight this particular battle.
He'll start getting sweaty palms if there is a threat and it becomes a serious one to the World Cup, because the World Cup's very important to the US.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how many of the European leaders would put their hand up and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do the other. because the Germans don't want to participate. That's up to them. But if the French and the British, and dare I say it, your motley crew, decide that they also want to support this initiative, then you start to have an impact. But I think this is just a political situation that will blow over, as they often do in these circumstances, and we really don't need to see sport being indexed to it, because it's nothing to do with sport. It really isn't anything to do with sport.
So Trump's just a bunch of noise, in other words?
Well, I don't think he's a bunch of noise. I don't think he's a bunch of noise, but I don't think this is a sports issue.
I think the bigger issue when it comes to the World Cup, and we commented on this story last week, was the number of nations now that Donald Trump is planning to reject visa applications for, including Brazil, who obviously are in Scotland's group. In fact, I think all 3 teams that Scotland are playing, their fans are on the list of people that Donald Trump doesn't want in the country. Can you imagine a World Cup with no Brazilian supporters?
It does make the mind boggle, I have to say. What about Simon's assertion that you Germans are a bunch of virtue signalers then, Constantine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. Not really, actually. I mean, these are 2 different issues. LGBTQ, and it was in regards to the Hungarian government leader, Viktor Orban. And in my opinion, it's good if there are at least some people that stand up to Viktor Orban and his policies. Ask the people of Hungary, and there are many upset with Viktor Orban, by the way. The next election will show that. But when it comes to Greenland, we are talking about Denmark territory, Danish territory. We are talking about a European member state, and we are talking about a NATO issue now. So that's a completely different set of issues, basically, and set of questions that are raised.
None of that's relevant to football, though, is it? Or sport or the World Cup?
That's the only leverage the European nations right now have. The United States raises prices for hotels in their cities by tenfold sometimes.
Yeah,
it will have an economic impact on the United States that the World Cup will happen. We are talking about the 250th anniversary of the Independence Declaration. The United States is proud of hosting the World Cup. Donald Trump will host a UFC main event card on the White House lawn. These sporting events are important to Trump because there he can show himself. He will be presented as the leader of his nation. He will show up at the Daytona 500 in a few days. These sporting events are important to Donald Trump, and the European states, they try to hurt him somehow, or at least get some leverage, and they think sporting events are where it can hurt him because he wants to be there, he wants to be at the center of attention, and he wants to be seen as the leader of the greatest nation in the world.
But we've seen all this before, and we saw it in Qatar when the England team were talking about wearing certain armbands for matches, and then as soon as FIFA said, well, if you do that, you're going to get yellow card and you're going to possibly get players sent off, suddenly the armbands disappeared.
I agree, Alex, but this is different, isn't it? If politicians seriously want to use this as leverage, they will. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, it was Scotland, remember, who beat Denmark at Hampden, and the Scots went through automatically and Denmark didn't. So they're in a playoff. You can imagine the Danes, if they win the playoff and get to the US, if this issue is still rumbling, what they're going to do.
Yeah, and that's for Denmark to do.
They'll be the top of the list when it comes to potential boycott.
It'll be interesting to if you subscribe to Constantine's view that a football type, if you know anything about Trump, then Trump is a very strident and strong character, whether you like him or you don't like him. If you genuinely think that a few nations that decide they don't want to play in the World Cup are going to dissuade Donald Trump from the agenda that he and his advisors have, because doesn't operate.
Yeah, but if it turns out to be half of Europe who are threatening a boycott,
we'll see. But it isn't at the moment, isn't it?
At the moment.
It's the Germans.
At the moment. Constantin Eckner. Constantin, thanks for joining us again. Off the back of the German politician Jürgen Hart, a member of the German Christian Democratic Union, raising the idea of a World Cup boycott in a German newspaper ahead of the tournament in the USA in the summer, following Trump's comments about Greenland. What did Trump say about Greenland, incidentally? Well, this is what he said.
NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security, especially when it comes to what we're doing in terms of the Golden Dome and all of the other things. We have a lot of investments in military. We have got the strongest military in the world, and it's only getting stronger. And you saw that with Venezuela. You saw that with the attack on Iran, with the knocking out their nuclear capability, potential. So, yeah, we're talking to NATO.
And of course, the United Kingdom and other members of NATO have said, including Denmark, who actually currently control the territory of Greenland, not so fast, President Trump. There is Tim. I'm a football fan. I would fully support the proposed boycott of the US World Cup. Says Tim, it's about time we showed some backbone here and gave Trump a taste of his own medicine. Oh, yeah. Simon, you think that this will probably go not a lot further?
I think everything with Donald Trump is transactional. It's based upon an outcome. People say it's bullying. I say it's negotiating. You want someone to move. You use robust language. You make strong claims. I don't suppose Donald Trump woke up one morning and said, Greenland. I would imagine there's a bunch of advisors that turned around at Trump and said, we need to shore up our military bases through a key strategic place like Greenland. We fear that the Russians might try to do the same thing. I know, let's buy the island, is Trump's attitude, in the same way that no one took him really seriously when he talked about the Riviera of Gaza, right? And that blew over. So I suspect now what you'll hear is the usual Trump positioning of go hard, get people to breathe in, negotiate a deal and have an outcome that everyone can live with, but nearer towards what he wants rather than what they're prepared to give for the reasons that he might want.
But negotiate what deal? There's no deal to be negotiated, say the Danes. They control the territory.
Well, the Danes will have that discussion and NATO will have that discussion and we'll see the outcome. In the meantime, it'll get played out through news cycle after news cycle after news cycle after news cycle.
See, he's walking a tightrope to a degree though, Simon. It's risky for him, is it not, Alex? Because they are the host nation of the biggest show on earth. They'd argue that Super Bowl is.
Well, they might argue that the Olympics following that is the biggest show on earth.
The World Cup is enormously important to the US of A and Trump.
I think FIFA have already handed so much control of this tournament over to Donald Trump that he feels like he's untouchable. Is this the World Cup or is this the Donald Trump World Cup? I mean, when you're making up a peace prize to award him at the ceremony, I think, as I say, I think he's untouchable, and that's on Infantino.
It could be an interesting test, Simon, of Gianni Infantino's ability to politic his way through this with his best chum Trump.
It's like we have half the information. I would imagine that Infantino will have the ability to be able to say on the visa situation, when we were arguing about the visa circumstances and the increase in the ICE perspective of how these stadiums were being affected, and we had these two professors on in the summer talking about the idea of ICE impacting upon the football stadiums, and they were using empirical data and talking about the one World Club Championship game they'd been to, which is not empirical data. That's one example. That's anecdotal evidence, and how this was going to play through. A lot of the time, we only have half the information, half the story. Again, I go back to the point. Whether you like it or you don't like it, I actually think that Trump's transactional approach to be able to achieve outcomes is more palatable than seeing what we see.
Palatable?
Seeing through our politicians.
Palatable?
Yeah, I do. I think things get done. They don't get done in this country. They don't get done in Europe.
Do you think come the kickoff in the first game, we'll all be saying to each other, I remember that months ago, that thing about Greenland and Trump came to nothing, didn't it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like it often does.
Yeah, so it's just all noise from Trump and we should disregard it.
Well, I think it has substance to some extent because Trump wants something.
Not if we're about to forget it.
Well, no, it depends if you're talking about the ultimate conclusion, which is Trump's going to annex Greenland, which no serious politician really believes. But if we're going to go to the extreme of the conversation, as the German individual seems to be indicating that we need to, which is if they do this, then we should be banning or boycotting the World Cup. If we're going to take it to that extreme, then it's substanceless.
Trump is taking it to extreme, Simon, vowing to implement economic tariffs in a host of EU states,
but Simon made
including the UK.
Simon made the most relevant point when we were off air during that ad break. It's literally in FIFA's regulations that you can't mix politics and football. So political bodies can't.
It's too late for that.
Can't get involved.
Gianni.
Well, no. It's one thing having a cozy.
Why did they not introduce a peace prize?
No. That's something completely different. We're talking about political influence. FIFA and UEFA have regularly said that domestic and international football, even the appointment of an independent regulator, almost threw the Premier League and English football into a situation where they could be sanctioned by the governing bodies because it looked like political interference. So what we're talking about is the political interference. We're not talking about the cozying up and the sycophantic nature of Infantino, and he was no more sycophantic to Trump. He's no more sycophantic to Trump than he was to the Qataris. He was out in Qatar running around blowing smoke up everybody's backside, left, right, and centre.
I didn't see the Emir getting a peace prize.
No, he didn't. But that's a new evolution in their
stopping
thinking. But I'm
8
not.
wars.
I don't care. But I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think that football giving away a peace prize is you are offended by it because you don't like Trump. I'm not offended by it because I think it's
Not
irrelevant.
that simple. No, it's not that simple. I certainly don't find what he does palatable.